there is something that has happened in the Alabama state legislature that I want to talk through because I think I'm kind of torn on it because it deals with freedom of religion, which is a big topic right now. Freedom of religion and freedom of speech are the two things that are probably under greatest attack in this country at the moment. So let's talk about what Alabama State Representative Standridge did in sponsoring In God We Trust legislation. He said, quote, "It's a simple message, but I believe it's a powerful message." So you can find this article on yellowhammernews.com. Alabama State Representative David Standridge was interviewed Tuesday on Fox and Friends, where he discussed the state's new law that allows In God We Trust to be displayed on public buildings. Standridge, who sponsored the legislation in the state legislature, explained that the idea came in part out of a recent debate about school safety. He said his views displaying the national motto as a way to bring added comfort to students, teachers, and staff while they're at school. So, this kind of ties into the debate that we're going to have later based on that Supreme Court case that you referenced when me and you were talking about the NFL kneeling controversy, because it's a similar concept. But before we get into what that Supreme Court case has to do with this, I'm curious, Dylan, just on a precursory glance, what are your thoughts on this? Because I've got a couple, and I can see both sides of the coin, and so I can give both sides of the argument if I need to, but I'm curious what you think. So basically, the synopsis is putting In God We Trust on government buildings and schools.
So I immediately view that as being, if you're coming from another religion.
Yeah.
Let's start from there.
Yeah.
Then you could claim that that's offensive to you, the same way that Christians would take offense in some way to any other religion, like if it said "In Allah we trust."
Yeah, or "In Buddha we trust." But and see, that's where I was coming from, right? And there's a legal standpoint that goes along with that point that we can get into in a second. But just on as a precursory glance, it's in our national motto, right? It's in the Pledge of Allegiance. And God We Trust is in the Pledge of Allegiance. It's on the dollar bill. It's ingrained in our society. Has been since our founding. That doesn't mean it's right? That doesn't mean that it should be based on the Constitution, but nevertheless, it is. And as somebody who's a religious person, I'm still the one that's sitting here and saying, maybe it shouldn't be, because when I look at the freedom of religion clause in the Constitution, I think that it is a violation of it, because what it does is it puts a religion on the people, especially if it's going into a government building. What are your thoughts on that? What you over there researching?
So the phrase "In God We Trust" was not put into the Pledge of Allegiance until 1956.
Really? I did not know that.
By Eisenhower.
Did not know that.
So it
hasn't been since its founding. It's a relatively new piece of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think because there have been, for example, the school prayer Supreme Court cases where it's saying, can you mandate kids pray in school, right? And they basically struck down that idea because they said you can't mandate religion upon any student. I feel like this is it's not mandating religion, right? But I feel like it is forcing somebody to be under a religious guise, because it's clearly pointing to the Christian principles, right? It's clearly pointing to the Christian God, a God which I believe in, but a God that which a Muslim or a Hindu would walk in and they say, okay, that's not my God, therefore I shouldn't be subjected to that in a government place or in a public place. And I agree with that, especially if it's a new concept. I definitely agree with that. Do you think that that's far off?
I completely agree with you on that.
See, I know there's a different opinion out there, and I really want to hear the different opinions. And as soon as we started talking about this, the phone lines lit up. So give me a call, 866-551-9933. And again, I'm undecided on this because, again, I do acknowledge the fact that it's in our national motto. It's put in by Eisenhower, but nevertheless, it is in our national motto. So in theory, it should be able to go on federal and state government landmarks. But it also does feel like it infringes on somebody else's freedom of religion. Coming from a Christian perspective, unless you're coming from a Christian legal perspective, you're not really going to have a problem with it. But if you're just coming from a Christian perspective, you're like, oh, yeah, in God we trust. I mean, it's a simple statement that all Christians live by. But if you're not coming from that perspective, if you're coming from Muslim, Hindu, atheist, you may look at that and go, I'm just not sure. And it may violate the First Amendment. I don't know. I'd like to talk about it. 866-551-9933. Let's jump out to Murph on line 1. Murph, how you doing this morning?
Just running late.
You and me both this morning.
Rough day yesterday. Rough day. But
I can feel that.
You know, it's God has always been a part of our national discourse, even before Eisenhower put it in the pledge.
Yeah.
But have you ever looked into Madalyn Murray O'Hair?
No, tell me about her.
Well, she was the quote-unquote atheist who basically led the charge, and I forget the time frame. Dylan might be able to look that up. 60s, I think.
Yeah.
Led the charge to have God removed from schools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you were, you know, it greatly offended her. And the story behind her was that she couldn't hold a job.
Yeah.
At all, period. She had no job skills. She got fired from every job. And at the time, Russian Soviet propaganda was real big. She actually applied for citizenship in the Soviet Union and was going to move and take her son with her.
Yeah.
And they denied her citizenship. And then, you know, sorry about your luck, because it was all propaganda.
Yeah.
So she's walking the rare time that she was walking her son, or went to school with her son and was walking to the classroom.
Yeah.
She passed by a classroom where the children were praying.
No, did we lose him? Oh, man. Do you have that name, Dylan? I'm going to look up that story because I want to know the rest of it. Murph, we lost you. If you want to call back in, I would like to hear the rest of that story. But, I mean, it's a perfect segue because we got to go to break. What, you got it? Hit me with it.
Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
Yeah.
American activist, founder of American Atheist, organization's president from 1963 to 1986.
Okay.
She is best known for the Murray v. Curlit lawsuit, which led to a landmark Supreme Court ruling ending official Bible reading in American public schools in 63.
So, oh, yes, we got him back. I'll push the next break out. I want to hear the rest of the story. What do you have to say about it? Murph, we lost you there, man. It must really be a bad day. You must really be running late.
I was still there, actually. I could still hear you, and so I don't know what happened.
That's crazy. We'll just blame our old phone system. But go ahead. Tell me what you were saying.
Yeah, well, so anyway, so she flips out, right? She gets mad. She gets angry. She drops her kid off at school. She goes home. She writes a letter to the editor of the Baltimore Sun newspaper.
Yeah.
In Baltimore, Maryland, and she mails this letter to the newspaper. The editor decides to go ahead and run with it because the whole letter is ranting about God and how God does nothing for anybody and God has no business being in school.
Yeah.
You know, so here's this angry lady because she can't keep a job. She's living on welfare, all this other stuff. You know, she's having a rough time, and she writes this letter. The guy publishes it. And this is when she became an atheist because atheists across the country started mailing her money.
Yeah.
Within weeks, she had no financial problems whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they convinced her to take this national and to make a big deal out of it and took it to whatever, and a bunch of people with some money behind her, and they sued, and they came up with this idea of separation of church and state. You know, and all that sort of jazz. Now, her son, she's dead now. Unfortunately, she's in hell. But her son is a Christian minister. I forget whatever denomination, but he's now a pastor. And, you know, that's where it started.
Okay.
Prior to 1960, whatever, when this took place, it was extremely commonplace and was not a big deal.
Yeah.
To talk about God in school. And
yeah.
So here we are today, and even with multiple religions, you know, when you say in God we trust, what specific religion are you endorsing?
Well, I'd say it'd be the Abrahamic religions, which I know then the argument that can come off of that, but I'd say that it is showing a clear inclination to the Judeo-Christian religions. which is
Well,
one that I
because
ascribe to. So, like, I'm coming from a similar perspective that you are. I'm just saying, at least on the exterior, it looks like it infringes the beliefs of those who believe in Islam or in Hinduism or Buddhism, etc.
Well, so if we said in the Creator we trust, would that be any different?
Well, no, it wouldn't be, because they struck down I think they struck down the forced teaching of creationism in school. Don't quote me on that, but I've read a Supreme Court case that dealt with the teaching of creationism in school. So I don't think we could put creator.
Well, no, but see, the point, though, is that all religions would acknowledge that a God of some sort created, and we're talking about religions. I'm not talking about atheism here.
Well, I'd argue that atheism is a religion because it's predicated on a belief system that isn't founded in any fact. It's founded in scientific theory. So it, in and of itself, takes faith. So therefore, it's a religious system.
Well, even Ben Stein got Richard Dawkins to admit that something had to create the universe.
Yeah.
It didn't just appear out of nothing. So even an atheist, when they're pegged down and have nowhere else to run to, will actually admit that something had to start the whole process.
Yeah, or the God particle, which is entirely unfounded.
Well, again, something had to create the God particle.
Yeah,
and that's Ben Stein did that. It was I forget the name of the movie he did a few years back. Really great though. But he interviewed Dawkins and basically made him admit that something, even if it was an alien, something had to create this.
Yeah.
So,
well, Murph, I've pushed break back by 5 minutes, so I got to run, buddy. But I appreciate that. That was a really good. Telling of the Supreme Court case that kind of started this whole discussion. So I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a good day.
All right, you too. All right, 866-551-9933. If you want to join the conversation, we got Roesemary Dewar stopping by at 6 o'clock. To have a little conversation. We'll ask her a little bit about this because she writes for a paper out of Athens, Alabama, is a contributor to the Washington Examiner's Red Alert Politics, and former co-host of a radio show. So we're excited to have her join the program today, and we're going to break down some of the current issues of the day. But before we do that, we got to run a break live from your Call K&S Heating and Air Studios. Alabama license 11120. This is the Wake Up Call. Well, we for sure sparked a conversation because that song ran so long because Dylan was too busy answering the phones to bring us back in from break. Welcome back into the Wake Up Call. We are talking about the Alabama legislation that was sponsored by none other than Alabama State Representative David Stanbridge that allowed for In God We Trust to be displayed on public buildings. And so we're talking a little bit about, is that constitutional? Or does it go against the freedom of religion clause within the First Amendment? 866-551-9933 is the number to get your calls in. Got a bunch of callers. Come on, get in there before the call boards fill up. We're going to jump out to Terry on line one. Terry, how you doing this morning?
Doing fine. How are you?
Better than I deserve, Terry. What's up?
Well, I think they ought to make that instead of In God We Trust.
Yeah.
I think they'll make it, may the force be with you.
See, that's not a religion. I'll get behind it with you, Terry, although some of those Star Wars fans are cultish.
Well, that's true, but nobody except a minion of the Emperor would object to that.
I love it, Terry. Appreciate you calling in this morning. All right, we're going to jump out to JB on line 2 in just 1 second. You want to get your opinions in. We're about to run to break. Come on. You can get them in. 866-551-9933. Oh, that never gets old. All right, we're going to jump out to JB on line 2. JB, how you doing this morning?
Hello, this is JB.
Hi, JB. Tell me what you're thinking about.
Well, you mentioned the word religion. Religio is a Latin word. It means to bind, and re, just infers that it's something that's repeated. So the word religion actually means activities that people engage in which they rebind themselves to God.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you can consider an atheist participating in any activities, even though he's a scientist. I'm a scientist myself, but I'm a Christian. But I don't think a scientific person who does not believe in God would consider his activities religion.
Well, maybe religion wasn't the correct word, but it still certainly is an ideology. And as a man of science, you should know that none of the theories around the Big Bang Theory are proven. They're just that, they're theories.
Do you know what the Big Bang Theory postulates?
Yes. I mean, it's quite complex to get into in the last 3 minutes, but what specific point do you want to get to?
Well, the real basic idea is that a grapefruit size of matter exploded 15 billion years ago and formed the universe. That's the basic idea. I'm a teacher also, so
yeah.
So we in chemistry anyway, the other idea about in God we trust. I mean, it's on our currency, so people are looking at that all day long. I mean, when they pay a bill or whatever,
Yeah.
So why would they be opposed, or why will it be illegal to have that on a building? I'm not encouraging it to be put on buildings, because I think if you draw attention to something like that, it really just starts a lot of lawsuits and a lot of dissension, that could just be totally avoided if you didn't put it out there where everybody is focused on that every day. But
yeah.
But I don't think it's illegal. If it's on our currency, then it's probably legal. But you don't want to do just everything that's legal, because you have to have some tactfulness about what you do.
Yeah, well, I would even make the argument then, if we're going to have the discussion about In God We Trust on the school buildings, then we should have the conversation about In God We Trust on the currency, because then again, I feel like the same point stands. But I got to run a break, JB. Appreciate you calling in. Appreciate the insight. Far more scientific knowledge and teacher knowledge than I have. I just know what I can read. 866-551-9933 is the number to call in. We got Roesemary Dewar dropping by in the 6 o'clock hour to talk a little bit about some of these current issues, and maybe we'll get her take on Omarosa. Ooh, I'm so excited. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wake Up Call presented by Yellowhammer Radio, live from your Call K&S Heating and Air Studios, Alabama license 11120. Good morning, Alabama, and welcome back into the Wake Up Call. The time is 6:04 on this Wednesday morning. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're excited because today we've got a bunch of interesting conversational topics. We have been talking about legislation that was sponsored by Alabama State Representative David Stanbridge, and it was to allow the displaying of In God We Trust on all public buildings. And we were having a discussion as to, is this constitutional? And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I'm really excited to bring on Roesemary Dewar right now. She is a columnist for Athens Now, a paper out of Athens, Alabama, and a contributor to the Washington Examiner's Red Alert Politics and former radio host. Roesemary, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
So tell me a little bit about you. So I just read the bio you've got there, but tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
So my name is Roesemary Dewar. I've been a native to Tennessee for a long time. Originally born in New Jersey, but couldn't leave. and I've enjoyed it here very much. Kind of got involved in politics politics began to really fascinate me in high school, and then got more involved during Obama's second administration, and just found a way to kind of express myself. Got connected with that paper in Athens Now, and got to expand to Washington Examiner, and I've been commentating ever since.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I knew you were from Tennessee because we talked about that before, but I did not know that the Alabama connection existed until you sent me that, and I was like, wow, I know where Athens Now is. It's right out of Athens, Alabama. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I do want to what is your favorite thing to cover before we get into that? So, when people say they commentate on politics, that's a lot of things, and usually everybody has a specialty. Like mine is Supreme Court law. I love it. I live for it. It's what I thrive on. What is your thing? What do you love to commentate on most?
Mostly foreign policy and feminism. It's after working for a pro-Israel nonprofit for 3 years, I kind of got well acquainted with kind of what's going on over there and some of the a handful of connections I was able to make through that. And just the way the left loves to talk about feminine or femininity, I was just like, you know what? Why not talk about that from more of a conservative perspective as well?
Love it. Completely understand. So from a conservative perspective, I got to ask, we're going to jump into a topic that has a little bit to do with feminism because of the rhetoric that was used by the President of the United States. I do want to ask you about the whole Omarosa situation. So as we know, Omarosa came out with these tapes from the Situation Room with John Kelly saying all these rumors and releasing all these tapes, has gone on basically a media circus right now. But President Trump tweeted out yesterday, when you give a crazed, crying lowlife a break and give her a job at the White House, I guess it just didn't work out. Good work by General Kelly for quickly firing that dog, end quote. Now, I know what my opinion is on this quote, but I'm curious what yours is for this rhetoric specifically.
It's not presidential rhetoric, unfortunately. I don't think it's one of his best moments, but
yeah.
It's like he's called over 20 people a dog on his Twitter.
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, it's not special, and it's not geared necessarily towards a female.
Yeah.
He just happens to use it for a bunch of people he doesn't like, and she's not that great of a person either.
Yeah.
So I mean, he did give her a break. She's a failed media star, and it's like, and she just didn't respect that, or still isn't respecting it to this point. With her tour, her media tour about her book, she really doesn't go into what she's talking about. It kind of feels like a secondary Fire and Fury book. That's just ridiculous.
So do you think that's the motive behind all of this? Because I've had this discussion multiple times on this program, and I can see multiple angles she's coming from. Like, I think she's trying to get in tight with the Democratic committee, and I could see her going to somebody like when Keith Ellison goes into not the primaries, my apologies. When Keith Ellison goes into the general, I can see him bringing somebody like Omarosa up to give speeches essentially about Donald Trump and things of that nature. So do you think it's just for the book, or do you think there's a bigger end game behind all this?
Oh, there's absolutely a bigger end game. If she could get on to Dancing with the Stars, she would do it. For me, it's like she's keeping every door open. She wants to see the money continue to flow, and I don't know necessarily if there's going to be a lot of grace for that. And it's like, even in the Democratic Party with some of the bigger donors, I don't see that being an end game for them to want to subsidize.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be the best move for the Democratic Party. She's not someone ideal.
Yeah.
And I mean, she can say whatever she likes about President Trump, but I don't think that's that's like flinging mud at a mud monster. It's not
yeah. Well, don't tell the Democratic Party that, because we're trying to go into November strong. So we can just tell them it's a great idea, right?
I was like, whatever their blue wave is, I mean, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it manifesting the way that they promised it would.
Yeah, it's more like a blue tide pool at this point, but
yeah.
I digress. So I am curious, though, do you think because she's said a lot of statements about the president and his rhetoric inside the White House, to his staff, to people of color, do you think that there's any validity to these statements she's making, or no?
There may be. I would love to see proof of it.
Yeah.
Until then, it's like, until I see a proof of it, I don't see a point.
Yeah, very good point. Okay, so I do want to transition into something that is also topical. So we were talking, and this is out of Alabama, and because I'm basically throwing this topic on you, I'll give you a little bit of background. So we were talking about legislation that was sponsored by Alabama State Representative David Stanbridge, and I'm sure you'll be writing about this for Athens Now because it's a big deal, because he was on Fox and Friends on Tuesday, and it was a law that allows "In God We Trust" to be displayed on public buildings. And we've been talking about this along with the First Amendment. And so this is one of two First Amendment kind of cases or ideas that I want to get your opinion on. What do you think about this? Because "In God We Trust" is, in all technicality, in our national motto, but does that go against somebody's freedom of religion to put "In God We Trust" on a government building?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, even though our country is built on Judeo-Christian values, I think God is broad enough to kind of cover what people do and do not believe.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, even if an atheist has a problem with this, I don't see why they would.
Yeah.
Like they don't. It's like typically they shouldn't care.
Yeah.
So and it's like we're not dealing with the theocracy. So I on that type of basis, I really don't see a problem with it.
And so, just playing devil's advocate here, which is ironic because we're talking about religion. But would it be a step towards a theocracy if we were to put essentially a deity of a sort, a deity that I happen to believe in, but we're putting a deity essentially in the government offices? Would that be a step towards a theocracy at that point, or am I just off basis?
No, I don't really think so. It's like there's nothing. Well, the whole point of the Constitution is a negative right. It's telling the government what it can't do.
Yeah.
So it's like at the same time, it's like there's a certain level of freedom that can't be violated, and I don't see necessarily declaring a deity. I mean, that's what any person who has a religion already does.
Yeah.
Would necessarily violate someone's individual right to expression.
Yeah, very well put. Couldn't have said it any better myself. All right, so I got to get into this, and this is another thing stemming from the First Amendment that some people are making the argument for, and this is something that has just dominated our news cycle for what feels like forever. So the NFL kneeling controversy. We've talked about it a couple times on the program. The season's coming back in full force, and people are yet again kneeling. And the NFL has tried to pass rules, and the rules have been withdrawn and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on the whole NFL kneeling controversy?
It was a rule before it was a controversy.
Yeah.
So
very well put.
I mean, it's like that was part of the job that you signed on to. Now, I can understand when people are dealing with individual situations with abuse or power of abuse when it comes to the police force, but that is an extreme rarity.
Yeah.
And it's like I respect a person's freedom to protest. Go for it. That's your right.
Yeah.
But if your boss don't like it, then he also has the right to fire you because you are violating your contract.
Yeah.
So it's like, do what you want, but enjoy the consequences while you do it.
So why do you think that seems very cut and dry? And I mean, that's the same ideology that I hold in that regard. But I'm curious, why are we still having this conversation?
I mean, there's still people feeling like they're not being heard, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think even with this move with Kanye and Kim Kardashian, with trying to push prison reform, is going to we might start seeing some things positively change that way.
Yeah.
And I do think that when it comes to the community, they do want to see a police force that is acting judiciously instead of like personal animus. So
yeah.
I mean, I understand if there's a community that needs to bring it up, that needs to expose it, that needs to fix it, but I mean, trying to make everyone else pay for it isn't going to get exactly what you want.
Yeah. And there's a problem that I have with it as well that I'm curious if you share this or if you would push back on it a little bit. And that is, I think if Colin Kaepernick wasn't the figurehead that started it, I don't think it would be as controversial because, Kaepernick's come out with the socks that had pigs on them and police uniforms.
Right.
I mean, he's come out and he's made many controversial statements, a lot of them, and he does. I'm not saying, yeah, I am saying it. He's not the right figurehead for this movement because he can't keep his ideology straight, and he says he's coming from this ground of respect, but a lot of the times he doesn't show the same respect that he in essence demands. So I'm wondering if Colin Kaepernick wasn't the figurehead for this, would we be seeing so much tension around this movement, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, I don't even think that President Trump is necessarily the best figurehead to try and oppose it in some way.
Yeah.
I think we're dealing with two people who are very bad at communicating on this particular subject.
Yeah.
Instead of them trying to figure out a common language, which neither one of them seems to be concerned with doing, they're just like, well, you don't understand what I'm saying, so I'm going to do this. Well, you don't understand what I'm not saying, so I'm going to tweet this, and it's not helping. It's not helping the situation.
So what do you think about the president getting involved in private business? Because there have been a lot of conservatives that have kind of pumped the brakes on that and said, look, we love the fact that you're standing up for the national anthem, love the patriotism, but getting involved in the decisions of private business doesn't seem like, well, good presidential business. What are your thoughts on that?
I had the same type of problem even when he got involved in the courier deal. It doesn't look good for the presidency. It doesn't matter what type of, what party you're part of, but it's something that he doesn't necessarily have to spend his time on. I think it ends up taking up too much airtime with other networks, but it's not the best look, and he should focus his energies elsewhere.
Yeah. So we're about to have to run to the break, but before we do, I'm curious. So is there anything that's on your mind in the current news cycle that you just really want to point out and say, look, that's wrong, or what's going on here? Is there anything recently that's really been irking you?
In New Mexico, where they had that compound where 11 children are being held and
Yes.
trained and stuff, I'm just like, I mean, well, if you want to see what Gaza looks like, that's a pretty good example of what it looks like over the entire area.
Yeah.
And the fact that they got out on a no money bail,
Yeah.
just a signature bail, I think is absolutely insane. But I almost wonder whether or not they're trying to see who's going to sign them out. I don't know if that's some type of bait to see if there's a web or
Yeah.
not. But that's some pretty nuts stuff going on.
I was about to say these people were allegedly training a child to carry out a mass shooting, a terrorist attack, and we're going to let them go? Like,
Right.
Okay, I don't even agree with the decision to give them any type of bail, but to give them a bail that was just a signature bail, to me that was just baffling. But that's a really good point that I haven't heard anybody theorize that maybe they're trying to see if there's a web or a cell going along with that.
That's the only reason why I can see them doing it. They're not going to try and it's like they're greasing the wheels for something bigger. And I mean, even for the judge to say, well, I don't necessarily see him as a threat to society. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah, how?
Absolutely out of your mind.
I mean, if you're training somebody to carry out a mass shooting, I don't understand how you don't see somebody as a threat to society. I mean, but
Absolutely.
I can go on about that for hours.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rosemary, we're about to have to run to the next break. I appreciate you getting up and joining us this early in the morning to talk about some of these really important topics. Really appreciate all the work you're doing. So for people that want to keep up with you, can you let them know where they can find you, where they can find your work?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at RLY and ND1.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Rosemary, again, we appreciate you joining us. Sorry we had such a difficult time getting this set up with the whole pre-record times and everything, but I'm glad it finally worked out. I've appreciated having you on the program.
Absolutely. You kept your word and I kept mine.
All right. Sounds fantastic. You have a great morning. Keep up the good fight.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye. All right. Again, that was Roesemary Dewar, a columnist for Athens Now and a commentator for Washington Examiner's Red Alert Politics. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to break. That was a fantastic interview. We're going to get more into the Omarosa and the NFL story. On the other side, me and Dylan are going to go head-to-head, clashing on the NFL debate. I'm excited. Dylan's looking at me like we're about to be Mike Tyson versus whoever Mike Tyson beat, because, you know, I'm Mike Tyson. Ooh, throwing out shots before we go to break. Come on, Dylan, we got this. Or Ali and Frazier. Is that right? Muhammad Ali and Frazier?
Something's wrong with you.
No, but is that right? Muhammad Ali and Frazier.
I don't keep up with boxing.
Yeah, I don't really either. 866-551-9933. If you want to talk about Omarosa, if you want to talk about Colin Kaepernick and the NFL kneeling controversy, hit my line up, 866-551-9933. Skip Doc, I see you coming to you on the other side. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wake Up Call.
Got to start to feeling so low. And I decided quickly, yes I did, to just go down and check out the show. Yeah, they were dancing and singing and moving to the grooving. And just when it hit me, somebody turned
Play that funky music, white boy. Oh my gosh, my parents would play this song almost probably like every Friday. And oh my gosh, that's why we didn't cut on the mics until like a minute and a half into that song. I was dancing around this studio. Dylan was laughing his butt off. It's a good morning. Hope you're having a great Wednesday morning this morning. Welcome back into the Wake Up Call. Ladies and gentlemen, 6:25 this morning. Hey, play that funky music, white boy. That's what I'm going to say whenever you start to play the song for the intro, okay? Sound good? 866-551-9933. All right, y'all know what's coming. Omarosa, NFL, we're hitting it. Final 30 minutes of the broadcast program. Final 30, 35, somewhere in that ballpark. We're going to hit it. We're going to go to Skip Doc on line 1. Skip Doc, how you doing this morning?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. About the NFL quantity about kneeling. You know, the Department of Defense is paying the NFL for these patriotic activities. This is not an organic patriotic activity. So the idea that we've developed this sudden surge or interest in patriotism is absolutely absurd. This is just a corporate tool to get money from the Department of Defense. The NFL doesn't really care. In fact, for years, pardon me?
I'm just going to go with no on that one.
The NFL doesn't care. They just want the money from the Department of Defense. But, on the matter of putting in God we trust in the schools.
Yeah, I'm going to go with no. We'll continue.
I'm an atheist, and I think I'm offended. And I think if there was a God, I think he would be offended too, because look at the schools. They're failing. Look at the currencies being inflated. If I was a God, I would be absolutely ashamed to be put in the schools or on the currency. I think the schools, if we should be having schools run by your government, I think it should be directed towards producing scientifically inclined and civically oriented students. These students are kidnapped. They're put in schools. They do not have a choice, and they're walking down the hall staring at these slogans. Now, what about things go?
They're
things
kidnapped?
Things go better with Coca-Cola. That's a slogan too.
Who goes and kidnaps them? Miss Betty, the 80-year-old math teacher? Does she drive up in the white van and go, "Get in, we're going to school"?
Well, if you don't go to school, you get a gun and a gun pointed at your parents' head, and they go to jail.
I don't think there's a gun pointed at their head. I think that's a little bit of an escalation. If you refuse to take your kid to school, eventually a gun will be pulled out. Okay? What about homeschooling? Well, what if you can't afford it, you don't have the ability, you don't have the wherewithal, you still are forced. That's why the tax dollars go to public schools if you can't afford it. But you're still forced to go to school. You have no choice. You have to go to school. Yeah, but if you want well-educated, civically inclined people, don't they have to go to school to be well-educated and civically inclined? As long as you abide by the school curriculum. If you don't abide by the school curriculum, a gun will be pulled out. So I'm not seeing the problem here. Then, if your goal, your personal goal, hold on 1 second. If your goal is well-educated, civically inclined people, then what is the problem with going to public school if you can't afford an alternative route to schooling, such as homeschooling or private schooling? Why don't we get rid of schooling completely? For the first 100 years, we had no schooling you wouldn't at have all. I'd say we're a lot better off now than we were the first 100 years. And if you want a well-informed, civically inclined populace, I don't think getting rid of schools is the way to do that. We for the first 100 years, families decided how their children were going to be educated. There was no public curriculum. There was no guns. Yeah, but there are also people that believe that vaccines cause autism, so we can both agree that maybe public schools are needed. Well, that's fine. If you want to send your kid to public school, of course you're going to have to be concerned about the other kids and their health. So why the heck should parents be vaccinating their kids if they have no interest in having their kids run other children? These all seem like ancillary straw man arguments. My argument is essentially, if you would like for an educated populace, you need schooling of some sort. And to say that it's going back to the first of 100 years, we didn't have schooling, I think we're a little better off than the first 100 years. Wouldn't you say, Dylan? Maybe just a little bit? Sorry, Skip Doc. Had to let you go. Going into the next break, it was just a slip of the finger. 866-551-9933. That's the number to call. Live from your Call K&S Heating and Air Studios. Alabama license 11120. Welcome back into the Wake Up Call, ladies and gentlemen, on this Wednesday morning edition of your NFL Controversy Talk. Me and Dylan are going head-to-head because I know we disagree greatly on this topic. It is a host versus producer showdown. But before we do that, shout out to Dr. Jason, who sent me a message on Twitter saying how much he loved the interview. Appreciate Rosemary coming on. It's a fantastic interview. But now, we're getting back into the debate. Okay. Colin Kaepernick started this whole NFL controversy a little over a year ago, right?
Several years ago.
Several years ago.
Started
whatever.
back like 2015, I believe.
It's still inconsequential. But, sorry, I'm already taking shots. I'm taking jabs. I'm like Ali. I'm moving around. Here we go. So, the controversy was started a couple years ago. Colin Kaepernick was the figurehead. It has since spread. The NFL has created a lot of rules that they have instated and then taken back about the behavioral conduct of their employees when it comes to kneeling on the field. And the kneeling is supposed to be in protest for a bunch of issues, some of which including racial injustice and alleged police brutality. So, I would like to just start off. So, Dylan, we disagreed with the fact that kneeling had to do specifically with the First Amendment. And I'm curious, so what is your case for why kneeling has to do with the First Amendment? And I know I framed this as like a debate, like we're going boxing, but you honestly could change my mind. I'm curious.
Is it in the First Amendment that protects peaceful protest?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't remember if that was the first one or if it was one of the other ones.
Yeah, it's the first.
And that's what this essentially is. It's a peaceful protest.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you somehow skirt around the free speech clause, it's still a peaceful protest, and they have their right to do it.
Yeah, but isn't this a private business at which this peaceful protest is going on? Isn't the NFL a private company?
I can see that argument.
So are they allowed to make behavioral standards to which their employees are required to follow? And if they don't follow these behavioral standards, are they subject to being fired?
So the company has the right to make those rules that requiring all of the players to stand.
Yeah.
Now, as far as leaving it up to the individual teams, that's still up to the overall NFL board to decide.
Yeah.
However,
And Roger Goodell with all his ignorance. But we won't get into that right now. That's a topic for another day.
However, even if they make that rule, I believe could be some kind of legal proceedings made saying that it is infringing upon their rights.
But I don't think so. But I'm interested in the case. Why do you think that could be the case? Because I don't think so. Because every business has behavioral contracts. For example, you're not required to wear any type of dress except essentially covering your private parts out in public in the United States. But if you go into a corporate setting, they're going to mandate a shirt and tie and a suit. And that's not restricting your freedom of expression through the First Amendment, which, clothing is defined as expression, but it's a behavioral standard for which you enter in when you enter a consensual contractual agreement.
So is freedom of expression actually protected in the First Amendment?
Freedom of expression, I believe so, but let me pull it up just so I'm 100% sure, because I do not want to disseminate false information.
As to my understanding, it's just freedom of speech, and expression has been co-opted to fall underneath that.
Yes. Yes, you're actually right. It is not specifically mentioned. Freedom of expression is not. However, expression is typically defined legally under speech. But where freedom of expression stems from, it's not written out in the Constitution, you're correct, but freedom of expression comes from speech, because when you speak, you are expressing yourself, and the term expression denotes that your speech is not necessarily just the words that are coming out of your mouth, like the words that are coming out of my mouth right now. I speak with my clothes. I speak with my money. I speak with how I choose to act. And so that's where freedom of expression came from. So it's not specifically noted, but it is inherently in there, and it's been a precedent that has been upheld by the Supreme Court time and time and time again.
All right, so this protest is still held that they can.
I'm not saying they can't. They can. I'm just saying they're subject to being fired, and it wouldn't be an unjust firing. That's my whole stance. You can do whatever you want, but I'm saying the company is in all legal right to fire them.
As the law currently stands, yes. However, if there were a number of players fired due to kneeling,
yeah,
I do see how there could be a very easy argument made in court about how they were fired unjustly for expressing their First Amendment rights.
Yeah. And I think it would be shot down by the idea that a business has the right to define their behavioral standards. But it's a very interesting discussion. 866-551-9933. Jump into this conversation with me and Dylan. We're slugging it out. We've been ready. It's Muhammad Ali versus Frazier. Is that a thing? I'm Googling that. It sounds right. I've heard it before. Ali v. Frazier. Yeah, it is a thing. I knew it. You doubted me. I knew it. I was right. All right, well, Dylan's getting to your phone calls, and hurry. The call bank's filling up, 866-551-9933. I'm going to go out to William on line, too. William, how you doing?
Hey, good morning from Harpersville, Alabama.
Good morning. Back in the home state. How you down?
Yeah, I'm going to go down here to Bluebell, drop this load off, and I'm going to head to the house.
Ah, gotcha. Well, we're glad to have you back in the state.
Well, I'm glad to be home. It's nothing like going home to the land of Dixie.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, your discussion this morning with Dylan. Dylan, in most places where you work at, you sign a code of conduct. And you have rules, way you have to present yourself when you're at work. If you work for me and you want to make a piece of protest at my business and disrupt my flow of my productivity, I fire you. You're gone. We're a right to work state, at least in this state. Now, as the NFL goes, those guys are there for work. They're not there for protest. Under the U.S., I forget which code it is, but you're actually required to stand when the national anthem is played, to stand up, flag is raised, place your hand over your heart. If you had a hat on, take your hat off. Military, if they're in uniform, to stand up and salute. I believe it's a U.S. code.
It's actually not. It was overturned by a Supreme Court ruling because me and Dylan have had this debate outside of the office, and there was a previous precedent that set that. However, there was the debate: should children have to stand for the national anthem and recite the the Pledge of Allegiance in schools? And it was decided that no, they wouldn't, and that's from a 1943 Supreme Court case.
Yeah, the one right before that happened in 41 or 42, if I remember right.
Yeah, I can actually give you the specific name. The one that decided that you had to stand for it was Minersville School District versus Gobbets in 1940, and then Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett is the one that overturned that decision in 1943 in a 6-3 vote.
Well, I learned something new this morning. But hey, either way, back to the topic at hand, I know we have freedom of speech and we have freedom of expression and all that, but there's a time and place for it. There's a time and place to go protest. If you come to work to protest, I got the right to fire you because you are interrupting my productivity and my company and my consumers, which my consumers are like to watch NFL, and they want to see their players stand for the national anthem and be patriotic. Whether or not if DOD pays the NFL to play the national anthem, it used to be teams used to pay for the national anthem, but it was too expensive.
Yeah.
So it's just an extra expense. Well, so what? Hey, DOD comes in and says, "Hey, I want to pay for the national anthem." By all means.
Yeah.
They're there to make money. They're there to make money also.
Mm-hmm.
Slipknot, that guy's a nut. But I'm sorry,
William, you're not being nice this morning.
No, I'm not. I'm in a fighting mood. I'm in a fighting mood this morning.
Well, I'm gonna get you off here if you're in a fighting mood because we're not in a fighting mood. I like the discussion.
No, I'm not in a fight.
Yeah.
I'm just.
Well, you make a really.
I just haven't talked to you guys in a while, and I kind of missed you. I've been getting some late days.
Yeah.
And I actually called in on Andrew and Jessica the other day.
That's all. Well, I mean, I'm glad you're not having to get up so early, but we have missed you. But we appreciate you calling in, and I'll let you go here, and I'll give Dylan a chance to respond before we jump out to the rest of the phone lines. Appreciate you, William.
Sounds good, guys.
All right. Have a great day. All right, Dylan, you want to respond to that? Because it was directed at you.
So as far as the code of conduct thing,
yeah,
how is kneeling during the pledge or the anthem going to be affecting anyone's productivity?
It's going to be affecting the productivity because just like what happened with in Miami, right? In Miami, recently, I think it was actually last week, a Dolphins player or two kneeled, and the police union came out and said, essentially, boycott the Miami Dolphins, do not buy their tickets. They're seeing a revenue drop from that. So it's not affecting productivity per se, but it is affecting profit in a private business setting.
So it's actually not the kneeling that's affecting them. It's the people who are calling for the protest in response to that kneeling.
I mean, the argument could be made, but it is in response to the kneeling. You know, every action has a subsequent reaction. So you wouldn't have the call for the boycott without the initial action of the kneeling.
That's also true, but then you wouldn't have this protest of kneeling during the anthem without what is causing that.
Very true. Well, I don't know. Colin Kaepernick doesn't seem like the sharpest tool in the shed. Others may be well-intentioned, but Colin with his pig socks doesn't strike me as Albert Einstein. All right, Brett, Charles, I see you. Coming to you after the next break. Dang, I wanted to get into Omarosa today. That may be tomorrow, but we're coming to you. I promise. 866-551-9933. Come on now, jump in. We're talking about the NFL. This is your shot. Tell me what you think. 866-551-9933. Live from the Call K&S Heating and Air Studios, Alabama license 11120. Guess what this is? Oh, yeah, that's right. This is the wake-up call.
I spent last night in the arms of a girl in Louisiana.
Did he spend last night in the arms of a girl from Louisiana, or were they in Louisiana when he spent the night in the girl's arms? Questions I have. 866-551-9933. Welcome back into the wake-up call, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great morning. It's always a great morning when Garth Brooks is playing. We're talking about the NFL. Colin Kaepernick, not the sharpest tool in the shed with his pig police socks. Yeah. Do I need to say more? Really? Do I? I don't think I do. But the NFL kneeling controversy by some people that are smarter than Colin Kaepernick is being debated around the United States and in some areas around the world. So we're talking about it right here because we're going into, a third season now where this is a thing? And we were talking about it during the break. Dylan made this point, and I think it was a good point. I don't think it would have been brought back up had President Trump not made it such a big deal. And I love the fact that our president is being patriotic, but I'm not sure I agree with him getting involved in private business affairs. I don't like government intervention in any business because I'm a conservative, and those are the values that I hold. So I don't like the fact that the government is trying to get involved in the private business of the NFL. That being said, definitely think it's within the NFL's right to set a behavioral standard that includes not kneeling for the national anthem. And if players violate it, can them. That simple. We're going to go out to Brett on line one. Brett, how you doing? Brett, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good morning. How you doing?
Oh, great. Look, are these guys not under contract?
They are, yes, sir.
Okay, then maybe not fire them on the spot, but, we're not happy with your service, so you no longer have a contract.
Yep. I mean, I think especially as the fans, because basically what the NFL is, they're selling a product to you. The product is you come out to these games, you watch the games, you enjoy the games. If their profit margins drop because you don't want to buy the product because they're doing something that you don't agree with, then they're going to fire they're going to fire the people to fix the problem.
Right. So, it's just, I do not agree with it. Not at all. So, they can look at it however they want to. It's still hurting them in the end.
Yep, 100% agree. Yep. All right, you have a good morning, Brett. All right, we're jumping out to Charles on line 3. Charles, how you doing?
Hey, Baylor, I'm going to give you a different perspective here, okay?
Okay.
All right. For the anthem to have an honorable meaning for our country,
Yeah.
it must be the willful, intended thing of the person, their free will,
Yep.
to choose to do what they do.
Mhm.
In those moments where you're saying, or anyone is saying, that the NFL has the right to do anything, I don't think they do. I think you honor your country. You can't be forced in like a Nazi situation. My place is going to tell you you must feel this way and you must do this. For it to be American, you have to decide yourself, and it be a part of you that you are doing that. Have you got me?
I got you, and it's an emotionally driven argument, and I understand where you're coming from, but I'm just saying businesses have the right to set a behavioral code of conduct, and that can be stipulated in the behavioral code of conduct.
Well, it shouldn't be for our national anthem. It should be because you have felt that way and you want to do it, and you should be free at that moment to decide. And nothing should be stopping you from your freedom to actually honor our country, which I would do and which I do, but you don't make a person do something that's against their will or their intention or their belief just because you want them to.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have a point, and I'm trying to find it right now. There's a very good quote I've heard about forced patriotism from time to time. So I understand the art.
The decision you were talking about was Virginia, and I believe it was some holiness kids, and their parents didn't believe it was idol worship. You know, the justice there, I want to say it's, I can't think of his name, Blackman maybe.
Yeah.
He says it very well. It's not a real patriotism if you make someone do it.
Yep. And, yeah. I think I found it. It was from Twain. It's patriotism is supporting your country all the time and your government when it deserves it. That's from Mark Twain. So, I mean, I totally get your point. I just think that there are behavioral codes of conduct that allow for the NFL to basically tell their players, look, either you're going to do this or you're going to get fired, because it's a consensual contract. But, everybody's got different opinions. That's why we opened up the conversation. Have enjoyed all the opinions. We're about to run up out of here. Michael Hart coming next. But before we go, I have to tell you, I got to tell you about my friends over at K&S Services that do heating and air conditioning. You got to go check them out. They're sponsoring the show. They love what we're doing, and we love what they're doing, and we want to share it with you. You got to go check it out, K&S Services, because what they do is, whether you're needing an annual service for your heating or air conditioner, whether you're needing just a routine, not an annual, my apologies, a routine service, whether you're needing an emergency service. Right now in Alabama, it's supposed to get 92 to 92 degrees today. You don't want your heating and air to go out at a time like that, because we'll be sweating if that's the case. So go check out my friends at KS Services, www.callks.com for more details. Again, that's www. Like W as in George W, www.callks.com. Make sure your air conditioning's right. Don't be sweating like I am in here when these callers start arguing with me. All right. Michael Hart's coming up next. Enjoyed spending this Wednesday morning with you. Don't give Michael too hard of a time. I know all he wants to talk about for his old show is the NFL kneeling controversy. So give him a call, 866-551-9933. Thanks. Dylan, thanks for the debate. Appreciated it today. Great conversation, as always. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Don't go anywhere.